What happened in 2022 shed more light on the far right because we had the convoy protests, the protests that actually blocked the city of Ottawa and even one of the border crossings.
Harassed with the inherent violence of a swastika.
We were actually looking at the data on social media, and then suddenly it happened in real life. So for us, that was not a surprising thing. The other problem we have with the search engine is the fact that it indexes a lot of hate websites, which means if I Google a name like, for instance, Alex Jones.
Sandy Hook is a synthetic, completely fake.
Google will allow me or will guide me or will offer me this specific piece of information. It's helping Alex Jones in disseminating disinformation.
The thing I want to talk about today is the Great Replacement.
Amazon Books is implicated in promoting hate and disinformation. And I have proof, the book is here. Can you read?
Made by Amazon.
We started a project on mapping far-right disinformation and hate in Canada, which was funded by the Department of Heritage here. And one of the goals of that project was to understand how hate is being disseminated on social media, as well as the amount of conspiracy theories and how and where and so on. So when I wrote the proposal, I had in mind the issue of so-called algorithm. It's what I think it's a big word that we often use now in the public discourse. But I frankly think that there are so many like dark spots, ambiguous issues about algorithms. What is even an algorithm? Like we know it's a program that is designed by a company or a programmer to provide information to people or to present information in a certain way, but we have no clue how they are written, who wrote them, the motivation, the logic behind it, no clue at all. We have really glimpses, like small indications of what these things are, simply because this is regarded as proprietary knowledge by social media companies as well as search engines like Google and so on. So they do not want to share. They are not interested in sharing the details of designing these algorithms and how they came about. I even contacted them. I wanted to see, personally, I wanted to see, okay, can I have a label? If yes, what are the procedures? Can I change the label? They told me, no, you can't, which means it confirms what we have been talking about in the study, that these algorithms are automated by the system, so-called algorithm, and generated based on few things. We have no clue what these things are about.
So just to walk it back, is far-right extremism, for someone not from Canada, how big is it of a problem?
Oh, it's so big. It's so big.
I mean, I've heard about it on the news, but it's hard to know from an outside perspective whether it's just blown up because it's dramatic, or whether it's a real issue.
So we started in mid-2021 trying to understand this, but what happened in 2022 was something that shed more light on the far right because we had the convoy protests, the protests that actually blocked the city of Ottawa and even one of the border crossings. That was 2022, but we were already in the final stages of conducting the study. And so we were not surprised. We were actually looking at the data on social media, and then suddenly it happened in real life. So for us, that was not a surprising thing. Hence, we did actually contribute by talking to the media. We had Carmen Celestini, a postdoc in the project, who was really active in addressing media inquiries about the protest convoy. So it's a big thing, especially because of the kind of geographical, let's say, proximity we have with the United States. You know, in the United States, it's a big thing. Trump came to power and so on. So we have a very close connection, and also the ideological connection a lot of these groups in Canada have with European groups.
Yes, for sure.
So, and even in Australia and New Zealand, like we had like a couple of far-right group members from Canada who went to New Zealand just a few months before the Christchurch attack, who were actually talking about the threats of Islam. Incidentally, a few months later on, the Christchurch tragic terrorist incident happened.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying here is that there is a very close connection among far-right groups around the world, especially in Canada and the United States, but also we can see this elsewhere. Okay.
Yeah, and sorry, please.
Yeah. So going back to the issue of algorithm, as I said, we were trying to figure out what to do, and one of the main, let's say, tools that are available, very basic tool, is what they call manual reverse engineering, which means if you don't know how this is engineered, you can at least look at the outcome of it, and from there you can infer how the algorithm is designed. So the only thing we can do is maybe search. You can automate the process, of course. Like, for example, you can automate the process of searching for Google autocomplete. You can do that. But for our case, we manually did that for every single conspiracy theorist. We search over 100 controversial figure. And when I say controversial, means famous people who are either involved in spreading conspiracies or themselves conspiracy theorists or endorsing conspiracies, or hate group members, or terrorists, and so on. So we had a list of over 100, and from that 100, we randomly selected a few ones of them introduced in our study, because we wanted to see, after Googling their names, we wanted to see whether Google offers an automated label, which is like a subtitle, to describe these people. And shockingly, we found that almost all the labels are, all of them, probably only one which was irrelevant, not related to our study, was negative, but all the other ones were either neutral or positive.
Yeah. And what made you focus on Google specifically? I've spoken to a lot of people, they tend to focus more on, the social media aspect. I think this is quite, it's coming at it from a different angle. Not many people focus on the search engines, at least comparatively. Yeah,
I think that's the issue we need to do, because the public discourse has been mostly related to the dissemination of disinformation on social media, specifically on Facebook, the Meta company. But I always say that it's not only Meta being engaged or involved here. It's actually so many other ones like Twitter. In fact, when I'm looking at the amount of disinformation spread on Twitter, I found it to be far more than what I have seen on Instagram and Facebook, especially after the recent moderation policies or procedures followed by Meta. I'm not defending Meta at all, but I'm just saying that people have been mostly focusing on Meta, but they forget that there are so many other traditional social media outlets, like, for instance, Twitter and YouTube, that have escaped public censure or blame.
Yeah.
And then came to my mind, okay, what about the search engine? And this search engine has actually not been discussed in the public discourses, like it's been completely ignored. But here we have, and the other problem we have with the search engine is the fact that it indexes a lot of hate websites, which means if I Google a name, like, for instance, Alex Jones, a well-known conspiracy theorist, and something, Google will allow me, or will guide me, or will offer me information on how to find this specific piece of information, which means it's helping Alex Jones in disseminating disinformation. So that's another thing Google is implicated in, but again, no public discussion about it.
So you call for a discussion. Are there any other, are you suggesting specific policy changes that you'd like to see, or are you more just asking for?
Of course, they should take more action
to start with the discussion.
This is
Do you want people to de-index websites, for example,
Yeah,
Or would you be
the
happy with
least.
just a tag of, they changed the tag from, say, radio host for Alex Jones to conspiracy theorist? How
That's a
far
discussion.
would you like to see it go?
Good point. That's a discussion we had with the team. Now, what is fair? What is right? Here, we think that what is fair and right is to describe someone based on what they are mainly known for. In other words, what is the dominant term that you might use to describe someone? Like when we say Putin, like, president, whatever, but he's also a dictator, right?
Yeah.
When you talk about Bashar Assad from Syria, a well-known dictator and a mass murderer, that's the logical explanation. I know there is some kind of a cultural label we are adding, but that label has already been there. And the problem is, that Google seems to be using the available labels or descriptions of a person in deciding how to describe a person. Mm-hmm. So they take from here and there. That's what I inferred from Google's algorithm. But notice here, it's all like assumptions because we really don't know. It's like they call them the black boxes for a reason. Right. Because we don't know what is inside the box.
So that would be a start, right? Opening the box and letting us know how it works.
Good point. Be more transparent. Tell us how you describe them, why you describe them. That's the most important question I have in mind. Why did you describe those people in this way? Mostly like when you call someone an activist, like this is more like a positive word, or someone only a journalist. Or
I think David Icke was my favorite one, where it says former footballer. I think he was a footballer for about 2 years. That was probably the best example.
Here we go. and that's the point of the paper, to encourage public discussion and also encourage people to do the same thing. Go ahead and search. Andres Breivik was the only terrorist we found that was described. I think you can Google the name mass killer, I think, which is odd because he's a well-known terrorist. Osama bin Laden was missing, which is fine.
I was kind of inspired by your study. Obviously, the first thing I did was like go and type in a bunch of names, to have a look. And I kind of found the same thing, like the dictators. It doesn't say dictator. It says like, Stalin is like the former president of the Soviet Union. But then the worse they are, they just don't have a title. So, you look up like Adolf Hitler and it just doesn't say anything, right? Which is just seems strange to me that some of them just don't have a tag at all, even though, comparatively, other people do.
It's like someone decided, no, I'm going to block this, allow this. Okay, go take this. But, it's so random. It's so vague. That's the main idea we had in mind in writing this. So the main thing we want to have as a takeaway is we need to hold all of them responsible for the dissemination, for the infodemic that we have here, for the dissemination of disinformation. I think it's unfair to only focus on one company. Again, Facebook, I'm not paid by Facebook. They don't I don't care about Facebook. But the point is, it seems that the public discussion is focused on that company. The other thing I would like to add is Amazon. I think Amazon also escaped blame. And that's something I'm now, it's part of the report I mentioned to you. We are conducting this study on the far right. So we are going to release a very long report on what we have found. Among the things that was shocking was the fact that Amazon Books is implicated in promoting hate and disinformation. For sure. How can you explain Alex Jones has a book on Amazon that could be easily purchased, in which he continues talking about disinformation and so on. Gavin McInnes has co-authored a book with Alex Jones in which he also defends some of Alex Jones' conspiracy theories. We have a well-known far-right group member called Lauren Southern in the book, in one of her books, something called Barbarians and Muslims, something like this. She actually promotes hate and promotes genocide against a specific group. So how could you explain this? And incidentally, some of these books, because they get out of stock, they end up being printed by Amazon itself, you know, for fast processing. And I have proof, like, you know, actually, the book is here. The book is somewhere here. That's like, I cannot find it now, but it's here. If you give me a minute, I can find it.
So you've got everything in your library. Yeah, dig it out. I'd love to see, if you know, if you don't mind.
Here it is.
Ah, there we go.
Okay.
And you bought that from Amazon, I assume.
And I will show you this book. Have a look. Can you read?
I have to get pretty close.
Okay.
Ah, that's better. There you go. Made by Amazon. Yeah.
So this book contains so much hate, attacks against visible minorities, that will be shocking to see on Amazon, but still being sold easily. Like, you know, I was thinking, should I buy this book or not? Because if I buy it, I'm actually promoting the book. But I thought, no, I will buy it because I need to study it and find out what exactly is in the book. And that's the shocking thing that I have.
Well, I mean, it's a good symbol. I mean, it's a pretty effective hook there to be like, you know, here it is. It says made by Amazon, so they must be endorsing this, right? That's
a good point.
You know,
that's a good point.
The way that it goes. So yeah. I got to say, it's been a very interesting conversation so far, because I often speak to academics about things like this, and they tend to downplay the political aspect. You know, that it's like, we need a dialogue or we need more research. Whereas you, on the other hand, you have, you seem much more assertive about what political action you would like to see. Is there a reason for that, or just the way you were born, or do you have, you know, funding that lets you get away with that kind of stuff? Like, how, is there an explanation for that?
I'm not sure what kind of academics you talk to, but I think now we are in a very bad position. Like, not only in Canada but all around the world, when it comes to the
privately people are very vocal about it, but on the record, you know, when you say, oh, I'm going to post this online, people are a bit more like, you know,
I think they don't want trouble.
Their criticism.
I get a lot of hate emails. That's the thing.
Really?
They don't want trouble. Yeah, I get a lot of hate emails. I get a lot of attacks. That's what they probably try to avoid. No one wants trouble, right?
Yeah.
And but I think someone has to speak, because if we don't start somewhere, we will not be able to find solutions to the problems we face. I'm not alone here, by the way. There are so many other brave scholars, much braver than me, much smarter than me, like probably 100 times better than me, who are doing more than what I have done. I'm just like maybe added one drop in the water. But the whole point is this: like, we create more discussion about like the fact that I'm talking to you now and trying to find why it happened and how to find solutions to it is in itself important. But I know what kind of outcome we will end up with. But I think there should be some kind of change, because we are really, as I said in the beginning, not in a good position anymore.
Yeah. So the immediate kind of wall that I see this discussion running into, and it's often a defense of really reprehensible behavior, but this is just, I guess, how it goes in the public discourse, is that people are going to say, oh, there's people in this list like Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example, who are like elected representatives, obvious conspiracy theorists, but because they're elected, they get kind of
legitimacy,
a parliamentary immunity to these kind of things, right? So I think immediately people are going to say, the first, I think, criticism people would say is like, you can't censor politicians like this. You know, it's censorship. Do you have a response for that kind of thing?
Good point. You know, if you don't want to be accused of censorship, at least don't provide a label which is a reflection of part of the truth. Like, what is this, congresswoman known for? This is what she's known for, spreading conspiracies, attacking visible minorities, and even spreading hate. That's what she's mostly known for. But also she has a title, an official title. Now, if you are confused about it as a programmer at Google, just don't give a label. Because when you give a label, you are just like giving credibility for certain people. And some of these labels, as I said before, seems to be taken from what is available around on other websites. So if in doubt, I think it's better not to give labels to people. But because by labeling them, you are actually assigning some kind of weight, value, especially that the majority, as I said, this is what we have found. We looked at over 100, maybe in 10, 115 controversial figures. And that's what we have found. It seems like Google does not want to offer something negative. If there is negative, they would not give the label, like Osama bin Laden, Adolf Hitler.
The only example I could find was like serial killers. I think that was the exception to the rule that I could find. People
weird, huh?
If they've been like committed of a criminal offense, then that seemed to be the line. But even then, some of them it didn't come up with. So, as you said, a deep search. But
it's weird. Like, I'm labeled as author because I have a few books, maybe 5, I have 6, but I'm actually an academic. So am I an author? Probably, but I prefer an academic. I cannot change that.
You don't get to choose. Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe you could tell us a bit about your career.
Sure.
It seems I was having a quick look at your CV, and it seems quite a storied history that you've got. So I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
I started my academic. Well, before that, I was born and raised in Iraq, and that I'm an Iraqi. Also, I'm Canadian, so Iraqi Canadian, and I got a PhD from the Iraq. I have 2 PhDs. And while I was finalizing my study, back 2002, I got hired by the International Red Cross, the International Committee of the Red Cross, where I became their spokesperson afterwards. In 2006, the situation became, the security situation became bad. So most staff were asked to leave and start working in Amman, Jordan. That's where I ended up in, and started applying for academic jobs, using my first PhD. So I landed a job in the Sultanate of Oman, stayed there for a few years. But during that time, I thought I have to study for a second PhD because of my interest in communication. My background.
What was your first PhD?
I have 2.
What was the first one?
The first one was in English literature, which was great. It helped me a lot. But
what did you read out of interest? I'm curious what your thesis was on.
That's a good question. Actually, it's
a bit irrelevant to this, but it's really interesting.
It was on representation. I was interested in understanding how the Arab Muslims are represented in popular fiction. And I traced that image in 20th century, of course. I traced them, of course, I looked at the history, but I mostly focused on what happened in the 70s and 80s. And that's why also it made me feel that I should study communication, because I saw that a lot of these misconceptions actually start in the media, in the news media. So second PhD, I did that at Leicester University in the UK while I was still working in Oman. And afterwards, I landed a job in the Netherlands, stayed there for 3 years as assistant professor at Erasmus University. And afterwards, we decided to move to Canada. And then I took different jobs and then ended up at SFU. So been teaching for over 2006. Over 15 years now. 16 years in academia.
Got to visit a lot of places as well along the way. So one of the perks of academia, right?
I taught thousands of students from all over, the world. It's been the most rewarding experience, I think. Teaching is the most rewarding because you get to understand people, learn how they think, and talk to them. Yeah, it's a privilege actually.
And
I'm
so,
privileged.
yeah. And so, how long into your post did you start the Disinformation Project?
Good question.
And could you maybe
2000.
just give a brief,
Yeah,
in your own words, like what that does? It's kind of a
yeah,
dashboard
good.
for false
In
news.
2018, when I joined SFU, I applied for a grant and I got it in 2019. That's when we started the Disinformation Project. I called it Disinformation Project. Um, so it's been running since 2019. Now we are in the final stages of finalizing our study. So the main goal of that Disinformation Project was twofold. First, we wanted to understand how Canadian journalists report on news involving fake news or disinformation. We even did an analysis of the news coverage on different terms like fake news, disinformation, misinformation, since the 1970s up to COVID-19, up to the pandemic. That's when we not because of a reason, it's just because we began the study a few months before COVID-19. And we thought, okay, now we have to figure out what happened before. With COVID-19, the picture completely changed. And suddenly the Disinformation Project became so important because of what happened afterwards.
Yeah.
The second aspect was looking at social media. We wanted to see, okay, we have a hashtag like fake news on Twitter and on Instagram. That's fine. So what kind of narratives do we have or discourses do we have when people reference fake news and some Canadian issues like Justin Trudeau, Stephen Harper, Erin O'Toole, and so on? These are our own politicians here. And we found long time ago, long before the convoy protest, we found a lot of political polarization. The right was more dominant than on the left, but both of them were actually fighting on these platforms. And we incidentally, we found Instagram to be more political, more militant than Twitter, incidentally, which was surprising. So that was it. That was the goal. But I thought, okay, since I have more money, why don't I expand? We expanded, and then we looked at other aspects, like, for example, the way Facebook ads are being purchased by different sites, referencing these terms. And we found some interesting like insight from Facebook ads targeting Canadians. Then we looked at a few disseminators of disinformation in Canada. Global Research on the one hand, and Rebel News, which is a far-right outlet here in Canada. So we fact-checked them and we published a study. I intentionally try my best to publish peer-reviewed studies for the reason that you asked me about. Why are you not concerned? Well, as long as I am like submitting and publishing in a peer-reviewed, I'm fine. Like if you have a problem, you can critique it. It's a peer-reviewed study based on empirical findings. If you have a problem, show me. Like that's how I reach my findings. Like I'm not like, for example, theorizing, saying, "Hey, algorithm sucks. Algorithm suck." But you know, you can say that. But if you have no proof or evidence, you cannot, you know, support your argument. So that's my, let's say, motto. That's the way I operate. Anything I say should be based on empirical findings. We ended up also examining state-run trolls targeting Canada, making use of public data that was released by Twitter and Facebook, and also found a few interesting things like how the Iranian and Russian trolls interfered in the election in Canada in 2015, as well as in 2019. And again, I published these findings in peer-reviewed studies. So that's the story.
Yeah. Listening to the talk about, you know, empirical evidence and research, it often makes it difficult to fight back against like misinformation. Particularly politically motivated misinformation is the amount of time that it takes to debunk it compared to create it. And again, as you said, to create like a it often feels like we're playing with a different rule set, right? You have to go out and get the data and support your argument, and at the same time, a politician might come along and just say the opposite without any kind of level of the same thought, and they're often treated as equal arguments. So are we fighting a losing battle against
No.
information, or you think?
No, I don't think so. Yes, there are so many disseminators of fake news and disinformation around there, but I don't think we are losing the battle simply because now we are more aware than before about the impact and the outreach of disinformation in our lives. Now we are more suspicious of certain actors. We are more critical. We are not yet there, but I think we are in a better position now. Yes, true. Debunking disinformation is hard, and I don't think it's practical to debunk everything.
Yeah.
Because it's just like playing the whack-a-mole game. If you debunk one, 10 other ones will emerge. It just will be a waste of resources, a waste of time and effort. I think the best approach is maybe debunk popular conspiracies, well-known conspiracies that become very widespread. But if you go to the smaller ones and do it all over and all over again, you will just be wasting a lot of your time. And important thing also is to debunk, also fact check people in power. This is very important also. So our focus should be here, as well as debunk and fact check news organizations themselves. They should not be also, they should not escape blame. They should also be held responsible. They should all be part of it, including academics. So that's what I'm saying. We are all in this together. We have to work together in order to understand the world around us and try to figure out, when we have misunderstanding about the efficacy of vaccines and whether, and also misunderstanding on whether COVID exists or not, we will be in big trouble. We will end up with people who will never be vaccinated, and they could actually endanger public health. That's why I'm saying we are all in this together. We have to work together on this.
And so it seems like recently, and not just because of COVID, you mentioned the truckers and, incidents like Christchurch. We've seen incidents where this has kind of spilled over now into the real world. For a long time, I don't think the effects were maybe as obvious. Now maybe, the impact of this is more apparent.
Not really.
Do you think so? No?
No, not really. I mentioned this the other day to someone else. I'm from Iraq, 2003. What happened? Iraq was invaded using a false pretext, weapons of mass destruction. And Iraq had connection with Al-Qaeda. Both fake news, both of them. And they knew it. The Bush administration knew it.
Yes,
and this is what also motivates me to study this and be very vocal, because this kind of fake news and disinformation actually changed the lives and impacted millions of people, including myself. Like the fact I'm talking to you now is in itself an indication or the outcome of fake news. I would have probably been still in Iraq, working, living my own life, not moving elsewhere. So it's been there for a very long time. Ironically, it has become part of the public discourse during the 2016 election and afterwards, because it impacted the United States directly.
Yeah.
When the United States uses that kind of disinformation on others, it's not a big deal. But for me, it's a big deal because, it's impacted my life. So in 2016, I asked many journalists, like, why are you so interested now? They say, well, 2016. But I said, well, go back in time. What about 2003? Not that important. And here we talk about the hypocrisy, we're looking at human value and looking at things around us. But, the point I'm making here is 2016, it became a very important thing, a very popular kind of discussion. And of course, it never stopped. COVID-19 exasperated it, and it became a well-known issue.
Yeah. So do you have any kind of, final bits of advice for like the average person, what we can do, to protecting ourselves. I think if you're probably watching this interview or reading the article, then you're probably, doing a lot to protect yourself already. But particularly like family members, people who are maybe a bit more vulnerable to this kind of thing, or is there anything we can do to help limit the spread of misinformation, or at least to mitigate the damage that it does?
Of course, the main thing we always talk about is be more critical, be more aware, and more familiar. But there is one key thing that I always have to have in mind, which is consensus. As long as we have consensus, especially scientific consensus about certain things, we should follow that type of reasoning. It's safer for us. And that's where we are now. We have a vaccine that works well. We are okay. We are probably, we are now much better than the beginning of the pandemic. That's because of following academic consensus or scientific consensus, pardon me. So, we talk about radical thought, fringe ideas. Yes, they are welcome, but they should not dictate or shape the way we look at the world. Radical thought has always been fought and countered, but also some types of radical ideas also change the world to the better. I'm not against that, but I'm against blindly believing in fringe ideas that do not have any kind of scientific basis.
Yeah. Nice. Well, do you have any just to finish on then, future ideas for the project, new areas you're going to expand into, that kind of thing?
That's a good question. I never thought of. Yeah, probably. Yeah, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It's really worrying, especially the way the Putin's regime is disseminating false information about what is happening. They are trying to make us. They are trying to make us think that what is real is not there, which is weird because for them it's like presenting a completely fake idea or fake world to their viewers and listeners. I find this to be very worrying because this disinformation is impacting the lives of millions of people. So maybe next step, depending of course on funding and availability of people, maybe it will be an interesting idea, an interesting project.
That interview was so much fun. A special thank you as always if you've made it this far in the video. Likes, comments and subscribers all help get the message out there. But even just by watching it, you've helped promote this video in the algorithm, and I really appreciate that. I tried to do something a bit different with the introduction this time, so let me know what you think. And of course, get involved with the conversation. As always, take care, and I'll see you soon.